things are going bad, but how do we make the changes and turn things around so that we avoid the catastrophe? We all kind of look at 9/11, and now 10 years later we see, okay, there was a clash that was built up on purpose, and then 2 wars that had no connection to the false flag operation that we all know we witnessed.
Right.
Yet somehow it's been 10 years and we haven't been able to figure out where we're going next.
My big discrepancy.
Much longer.
My big discrepancy with the 9/11 is for one, Building 7. The way it just looked demolition style, and planes obviously hit the building, and some say that George Bush knew about it and that he was behind it, and I don't know as though I go that far, but I think that there were some members of the government who knew what was going to happen and did nothing to stop it. And I think that bin Laden, he may have been involved, I guess, but I think he's more of a fall guy for who was really behind it. And, and I don't like to do conspiracy like that, but it's just what I see from everything that I've seen.
Well, let's go much further back then, Michael, right? Because the big conflict between the East and the West and Christians and Muslims seems to be this concept that there's 2 sides. There's a light side and a dark side, and if you're Christian, you're light, and if you're Muslim, you're dark. And we're coming to a clash of civilizations. And yes, it has something to do with the Middle East and the land of Israel on the map right now, and America and its support for Israel. But really, those of us who are paying attention to the story in the long tail fashion, meaning not just what's going on today on the news, but what's been happening historically for a long time, those of us who talk about it from a historical point of view and a spiritual point of view, we say this story is a lot longer than people realize. And what they're just waking up to right now is so strange and weird that a lot of them can't handle it. Now, when Muslims say we believe that there's only one God and we use the term Allah, people kind of get freaked out by the Arabic because they don't understand the term. And then you hear a lot of people especially in the Christian right wing, that will say, oh, the Muslims worship some strange pagan moon god, right? And you hear these strange concepts, and so a lot of people have a misunderstanding. When we say the term Allah, we mean the God that created you and me and the world and everyone, the sky, the earth, and all that is. I mean, there's only one actual real God who's the planner behind all of the things. But now, as we start to get a little bit more advanced with society, we're starting to realize there's a lot more going out in the heavens than we thought.
Yeah, me personally, I don't care if somebody worships a rock. I don't judge people's religions. I could, honestly care less what somebody worships, or as long as they're a good citizen and they're not out to hurt people, and that's my main concern. As far as religion goes, I do believe in a God. I don't know exactly what he is, or just don't know. But I know that there is a higher power, and I don't know as though it's exactly like the Bible puts it out. I just don't know. But at the same time, I know that there is something, and we'll definitely get into that a little later with my alien theories and so on. So yeah.
Exactly. See, I was thinking about that myself and saying, once you look at it from the light of the past, then you start seeing, okay, what people were saying in the past was that there is a supreme creator, a grand architect of everything, an actual God, a light of all lights that puts the light of your soul, my soul, you're alive, I'm alive, we have a soul. That's what makes us be. There is a plan over all of these things. And in the ancient times, they used to say, there are many people here on this earth who are pagan worshipers, and they're worshiping false gods. Now, not until recent times have we started to understand this concept of false gods, meant people who had supernatural abilities or godlike abilities that perhaps came from the heavenly realms, and they were considered to be gods, but with a small g, instead of gods with a big G, right? This is what I meant by when we say Allah in Arabic, we mean the supreme creator, as opposed to English. You say God, and it's kind of a nebulous term because some of the pagan gods, you still say God, so it's hard to differentiate. And now in the West, we're starting to realize that when in the East they were talking about gods, they were talking about beings from different heavenly realms that had abilities or powers or technology that seemed magical or mystical or even so advanced that they're supernatural.
Sure.
And we're starting to realize that a lot of the ancient tales from the East that were myths, whether it's the Greeks and the Romans, or the stories of dragons in Asia, or the stories of Jinns and other types of interdimensional beings in the Middle East, they're not just myths and fairy tales. That most of these beings, whether they're fairies or goblins or leprechauns, they're talking about actual spiritual entities in other realms. And as more and more people become more advanced to what's going on spiritually, you're starting to hear more and more people talk about what goes on the other side, whether it's the dark side or the light side, and people are exposed to both.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there is a light side and a dark side, I guess, is how people see it. And, for me, I know that I don't know if we're going into the realm of death, but, I know there is another side, and I believe that there's demons. I believe that there's, angels. And I don't know what those angels could be, aliens. Like I said, I even said this last night, if we go back a few thousand years and we flew a hot air balloon over those people, they would have thought you were a god, Yeah,
exactly. And we see the case with same things with certain primitive tribes or islanders. They see some advanced technology and they have food drop shipped to them phonetic style. They think it's food descending down from the gods. And from their point of view, yeah, you have beings who can fly through the air like birds. That's amazing. We didn't have the concept of flight in the last couple of hundred years. And so now we look around and the idea of taking ships into outer space or developing some kind of warp technology or faster than light traveling is what we're all dreaming about now. But the idea of even just getting a couple of feet off the ground before was a big deal. Back during the time of Abraham, who was our father of the light of all the religions, he's dealing with Nimrod, who's trying to build a tower to get into heaven, right? Same kind of concept.
Sure. And there is actually some evidence, depending on who you talk to, some archaeologists who say that there's actually evidence that there was a lot more technologies many thousands of years ago, and that there was civilizations here long before we thought, and that they did have flying machines. Atlantis is one topic to bring up when we talk about something of that nature. Frank Joseph Hoff, who is a researcher for Atlantis, and he says that there was flying machines, and they find stuff. I guess when they do these digs, these archaeological digs, they find something. I believe it was a computer, actually a computer from then, and that some of the arrows point towards maybe them having space flight. So you got to wonder now if maybe when we go to the moon, we found stuff, and maybe that's why we're not back. Maybe they're still there.
Well, this concept, Mike, is just starting to get really popular amongst a lot of these so-called New Age alternative science people, alternative history methodology people, talking about the fact that many of the ancient societies that we're looking at and the sites that we're seeing, especially as a Muslim, we look in the Quran and there's a few verses talking about, look at the ancient societies and see how advanced they were and how far they had gotten, as if suggesting they were much more advanced than we are. And there's a growing concept that people had been spiritually more advanced and that we've been devolving spiritually while we've been evolving technologically. And so now we're almost at a point where we've reached the end of the technological period, meaning we've gotten to the point where we either self-destruct because we've outgrown our technology's outgrown our wisdom, or we have to make a leap in spiritual wisdom where we can be wise enough to have more advanced technology without destroying the whole earth, right? Because we've gotten so smart that we could all kill each other instantly.
Well, I don't well, that's where we go back to governments, You can give them technology. I think it's like anything. A gun could be good, used for maybe hunting, or it could be used in a bad way to hurt people and steal from them. And I think that's the same thing with some of the technologies we have, such as the nuclear weapon. That was turned into a weapon. And let's face it, one of those going off can destroy the whole world, and there's millions of them out there. So, that's a big concern. And that's why I hate to see these wars kicking up, because you just never know who's going to be crazy enough to hit that button.
And that's my point, that we've gotten to the point where it's so easy for us to destroy ourselves unless we get to the point where we've morally, spiritually, character-wise, internally gotten to the point where we realize that it's not beneficial to actually kill each other. Right?
No, it's really
and that
not.
is something that's happened in the last 10 years. I mean, we've seen with Bush Jr.'s strategy of going into war that the war strategy wasn't the best strategy. Having boots on the ground and taking the money and the effort wasn't the best solution to the problem. We still need to find a political solution after 10 years. And if after 10 years you need a political solution, then you could have found a political solution at the beginning without a war.
Yeah, that's why I'm led to believe sometimes, they say, hey, we're going to war. I mean, this was because of, it was supposed to have something to do with 9/11. I mean, why did we go into Iraq? They weren't behind 9/11. And so it leads me to believe there was other reasons. I mean, then a lot of people will say you go back into history, and the United States is the one that put Saddam where he was. And it's just like Bin Laden as well. We helped him out to fight the Russians, I believe. And, so we built him up too. It's like we build them up and then we use them as fall guys.
Well, if you want to get into the deep conspiracies, you say there's always a room of cigarette-smoking men who are the bankers and controllers of the so-called military-industrial complex.
Well,
but, I mean, there's a little bit of truth to that.
Right.
There is a little bit of truth to that. Of course, there's people who have always benefited from war, and war is financially beneficial. And we're seeing what's happening with the economy, the Federal Reserve, and the dollar just falling apart, that all of us are watching the system that's been created, the banking system, and we're seeing that it's self-destructing because those who are involved are pulling so much money out of the system without creating anything because it's easier to deal in debt derivatives and make money off of leverage instead of actual manufacturing, that they're almost destroying the country. And they don't care about America. They're not constitutional libertarians, or they're not, worried about their patriotic duty. They're worried about the bottom line of the money. And so most people who watch what happened saw 9/11 as a last-ditch effort to get this military-industrial complex going into another big third world war. And I think most Americans realize that it's not going to escalate any further, although there's still some tension in Pakistan, and that war isn't the answer to our problems. I think we kind of demonstrated for ourselves with 10 years in Iraq and then now Afghanistan that actually going to war doesn't fix the problem, and that we probably shouldn't have made that decision. I think the Americans feel that even on the right wing. Once you go to war, nobody wants to back out. But
I think you and I know that, and I think a lot of the listeners know that, but sometimes I wonder if the ones pulling the strings actually believe that, because, to have two wars going and then we don't even do anything to protect our borders, really, it just seems crazy to me. I mean, just like the illegal immigrants could get across the border, so can the terrorists. So I'm surprised nothing else has happened since 9/11 myself. And because it hasn't, I just kind of wonder, it's just, there's that conspiracy thing again.
You got to wonder if there was anybody out to get you from the start.
Exactly.
Right? It's like 1984 all over again.
So now let's talk a little bit about the planet now. Obviously, there's changes on the planet weather-wise. We've got floods everywhere, earthquakes, and just storms are getting greater. So do you see a pole shift, cataclysm event coming our way?
So from the traditional point of view, even from the Islamic point of view, all the ancient communities have what they call signs of the end of days or signs of the final hour. And amongst the Muslims, they have what they call the last major 10 signs. Included in the last major 10 is stuff like, the Antichrist and the return of Jesus Christ. But the first of the major 10, the first of the last 10 signs to occur, according to the Prophet Muhammad, is called the changing of the sun, or the sun rising in the west. And it's kind of strange because all those who are talking about the coming of the new age or the signs of the end of the world, especially the Mayans, refer to this concept of the changing of the sun or the sun rising. So when you look back at the actual text of what the Prophet Muhammad said almost 1,500 years ago, you find that he said